What is up, everybody? Mr. Curtis here. Welcome to Unit 6.6 and 2 for 1, 6.7. Who doesn't like the 2 for 1? This is causes and effects of global migration during this period of 1750 to 1900. Let's rock and roll and get into this, okay? So first of all, if you don't know what migration is, it's the movement of people. There's immigration, which is when you come to a country. There's emigration is when you leave that country. So depending upon how it starts. Little contextualization. We're going to go contextualization within this time period. I'm just going to go mind blown on this. 1750 to the mid-1800s. Just a couple things that are going on. And I know you know this already because you are all so smart. But we have industrialization going on in Western European countries. This really allows for a lot of opportunity. If you're not from an industrialized country and you're from maybe a poorer country and you look at this industrialized country as a way to make money and to improve the status of your family or familial relations, you might move there. Also, you have the ability to travel easier. We have like the travel time on ships decreases. Railroads allow you to travel through other areas. So naturally, it's an easier to travel. So that encourages, this industrialization process encourages people to move. Also, we have imperialism going on. We have Europeans who have colonized around the world. The people who live in their colonies are considered subjects or citizens of that empire, and therefore can travel freely usually between different countries. So for example, if you are an Indian living in India in the British Raj, you can travel to South Africa, you can travel to Britain, you can travel to Australia, and you might travel because you might see better opportunities in other parts of the empire that you don't necessarily have in India. So in terms of population shifts, I just want to show you this kind of quick about the number of people moving, because we're really talking about a huge number of people. And when we get into the nitty-gritty of causes and effects, I just want you to know that we're not talking about like a couple hundred people. We're talking millions upon millions of people. We're going to have 45 million people. That's a huge number over the course of, 50, 60, 100 years leaving south. This map's a little weird, right? Leaving South and Southeast Asia. So that's the green lines here. And you can see people from South and Southeast Asia, or from South Asia are going to Southeast Asia. We have people going to East Coast of Africa, South Africa, and then of course over to the Americas. And people are also traveling into Britain. We have Western Russia and who are going to leave to East Asia. All right, because we've opened it up with the Trans-Siberian Railroad, if you remember Reform and Reaction in Russia. We have China. People from China are going to leave. Most people from China are going to leave and come to the west coast of the United States, specifically working on the railroads and some of the stuff on the west coast. There are also some people from China are going to leave and go to South America. And then, of course, we have probably the most notorious for people in American schools, and you probably learned this in U.S. history classes. We have a large number of people leaving Europe, coming to the Americas, specifically coming to New York City through Ellis Island, as well as other areas in the southern part of the United States. And lastly, we have people from Europe coming to Latin America. And Latin America is going to encourage it during this period because they're trying to lighten the country. If you remember that from earlier in this unit is their goal. So population shifts. So here's the deal. And this is true today. So migration is a huge issue around the world today as we become more interconnected. Migrants are trying to leave impoverished countries and come to wealthier countries. And these factors are true in the 21st century as they were in the 19th century. So the factors are two things. You have push factors, things that push people out of countries, and then you're going to pull factors which bring people in. So the push factors are these. One, we see population increases. And because of more food and because of better medicines, even in unindustrialized countries, population goes up. So population means more people, usually means less jobs. Number two, faster and cheaper transportation. Like I said, connecting back to the Industrial Revolution, it's easier to travel. So unlike back in the 1480s, when you were going to travel 3 months to go somewhere, now it's a lot quicker. We've shortened travel time significantly. So it's less costly and it's easier to move around. Number three, we have a lot of political unrest and regional persecution, meaning that there's a lot of just fighting going on. We have these reform and reaction movements. We have people reacting to them, and we have wars going on, and people are being there's a lot of anti-Jewish sentiment, especially in Europe, whether it's in Russia or whether it's in Eastern Europe, where there's what are called pogroms, where essentially the governments are trying to wipe out certain villages and certain towns and encourage them and almost force them to leave the country. We also have famine going on. You've probably heard of the Irish potato famine, where really what it is the British realize that they don't have enough potatoes or enough food for themselves, so they go in and they take and essentially steal potatoes from the Irish. So there's a decrease in food availability for people in Ireland, so a lot of Irish leave Ireland and come to the Americas. And then there's just lack of employment. It's not industrialized. You're pretty much a farmer unless you can become a merchant or an artisan, and that's all you got. So a whole bunch of factors here. So the next thing are the pull factors. What brings people in? Urbanization. All right, you can move to cities, and those cities will generally have what are called ethnic enclaves, which are areas like a Chinatown, or there were areas that were specifically for Irish Americans to go to in certain cities, or the Italian section, Little Italy. And these areas encourage people to come to these certain areas because they know that they will be welcome there, and there will be people who talk and eat like them and have the same culture. Also, there's more farmland in an area like whether it's in the United States or even the eastern part of Russia. There's more farmland. We're opening it up because of these railroads. So we just have more availability of land, and that land is cheap, which means people who are coming and don't even have a lot of money can still purchase some of these lands. There's obviously the economic opportunity. For example, in the United States, that idea that the roads are paved with gold, which they were not. And then we have people seeking political and religious freedom, obviously, similar to the 1450 to 1750. And then we have the abolition of slavery. There's still a need for cheap labor, but we don't have people enslaved anymore because we've ended slavery in the mid-1800s in most places around the world, but we still need labor that we can pay people less than what someone maybe who is a citizen already of the country would expect. So we are going to see some forced labor within this system of migration of people. The main one is there's going to be, and first one is indentured servitude. And indentured servitude says, I can't pay my passage. I'm not wealthy enough to pay a passage on a boat and to settle in an area. So in exchange for this passage and for settling somewhere, I will work for a certain amount of time when I get to this new land. And that's indentured servitude. So you have to work off usually it could be 7 years, it could be 5 years, and you have to work essentially for free for that time, and then you gain your freedom. We're mainly going to see people from India. So you can see this large swath of people from India mainly coming to the Caribbean to work on plantations because slavery is essentially ended. And then from China as well to the Caribbean as well as to South America. And like I said, to the United States as well. Also, there's going to be convict labor used. The British see the jails are filling up way too rapidly with industrialization. So rather than letting the jails fill up, they will start exporting people and forcing them out of the country. And one of the main, the convict colony it's called, is Australia, where it was really settled for the most part through a large population of people, of Europeans, people in Britain who had committed crimes because of the overcrowded jails. So these are both essentially forced labor. It's not slavery because slavery is kind of ended, but it is forced labor. So in terms of the effects of this, we have all these people moving around. So here's the effects. Number one is changing demographics. Like I said, some Latin American countries are going to push to lighten their country. So they're going to encourage Italians to go to Argentina, for example. And they're going to encourage Europeans to come to their country to keep their country light. Okay, that's the racism that exists from the age of exploration. We also have a large number of males who are migrating. This leaves women back at home taking over male positions because generally migrants tend to be male. And this is true in the 21st century as well, where a lot of people who come to the United States, for example, from many Central American countries tend to be more male as opposed to female. So that's number one. Number two is we're going to see, and this is kind of the last piece of this, we're really going to see a lot of resentment towards migrants. Usually resentment happens in economically difficult times. People tend to not care about immigrants coming to countries when they come and economic times are good, usually. However, many people resent migrants. When people come from other countries and move into towns, oftentimes the people of those towns look at the migrants as being different and as being almost trying to change the culture of the people rather than saying, rather than looking at the United States, for example, as a melting pot. We're going to see a lot of personal displays of prejudice where people personally join groups and organizations to show their prejudice. In the United States, during this time of the height of migration, which is the mid to late 1800s, we see the rise of the KKK, which was not just against African Americans, but was also against Catholics and Jews as well. And Italians and Irish were Catholics, and we have a lot of Jews coming from Eastern Europe because of the pogroms, so we see the rise in the KKK. Often we see this resentment, this kind of personal, where we refer to, it's referred to as a whole group of people are all criminals. They're all murderers, they're all thieves, they're all drug dealers. And this is kind of this personal display of preference where you label an entire group of migrants who are coming as a result of those push-pull factors as a certain, as something specifically. Also, we have legal restrictions. So we have, this is personal displays. We also have these legal ways that are going to be restricted. And two specific ways is one, there's something in Australia called the White Australia policy, essentially from 1875 until 1975. That's crazy. That's not too long ago. Well, maybe it isn't for you. I don't know. It isn't for me, I guess. But it's going to limit immigration to Australia, meaning that you can only immigrate to Australia if you are of European descent. So they basically ban anyone from South, Southeast Asia, East Asia. If you're of European descent, you can come to Australia. But if you're not, you are not allowed into the country. So that's called the White Australia policy. This is a political cartoon from this time. This is supposed to be pro-White Australia policy. This is a man from China, and this is what he brings with him to Australia, according to the White Australia policy supporters. You know, opium, immorality, robbery, a whole bunch of bad stuff. And he looks like an octopus, and he looks animalistic, and we're going to try and portray him as being evil, essentially. Also, in the United States, we have the Chinese Exclusion Acts, and this is Uncle Sam here. From 1882 until 1943, anyone who was of Chinese descent was banned from entering the United States. And China, this is the Uncle Sam figure, character here, kicking the person from China out of the country through proclamation. So you can see, vote no and keep Australia white for the White Australian policy. Move myself up here. And then Chinese, no, no, no. So we see this legal restrictions of resentment towards migration and migrants. So that's what I got. A lot of migration in the world. You probably see some themes going on here that are going on currently around the world. But that's another story for another day. We'll get into that in the last unit. That's all I got. You got any questions? That's the end of this unit. We're done unit 6, which means unit 7 starts the 1900s. We're almost there. Giddy up. Any questions, write it down. You know. Let me know. I'm out.